What's up, short attention span history nerds? My name is Chip, the true genius behind 10-minute history. Today's video is the history of Christmas. Not the fat man in a red suit breaking into homes on December 25th Christmas, but the story of how Christmas came to be. But before we get started, I want to know what other holidays or annual celebrations you want me to do a video on. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Now, let's go back, way back, to when mid-December was all about getting drunk and Santa Claus was a hot-headed man named Saint Nicholas, who reportedly punched a man he disagreed with in front of the emperor, which was a big no-no. Okay, let's roll the intro and wake up the narrator.
The dead of winter has been a time of celebration around the world for centuries. Way before the arrival of Jesus, early Europeans celebrated a new birth in the darkest days of winter, probably because most of them died due to frostbite and the survivors were simply happy they didn't die. And the lucky survivors rejoiced and celebrated during the winter solstice when the worst of the winter was behind them. These people could look forward to more sunlight and less toes falling off due to the magical white powder that fell from the sky. In Scandinavia, the Norse celebrated Yule from December 21st, the winter solstice, well into January. In recognition of the return of the magic ball of heat in the sky, fathers and sons would bring home large logs which they would set on fire. The people would feast until the logs burned out, which could take as long as 12 days. And that's one big ass log. Sounds to me more like they were lighting an entire tree on fire. The Norse believed that each spark from the fire represented a new pig or calf that would be born during the coming year. Funny that they equated gaining livestock with each spark and not hoping that each spark meant their children wouldn't die at 2 or 3 years old from disease or being eaten by a wolf. The end of December was the perfect time to celebrate in most areas of Europe. At that time of the year, most cattle were slaughtered so that they wouldn't have to be fed during the winter. For many, it was the only time of the year when they had supply of fresh meat. In addition, most wine and beer made during the year was finally fermented and ready for drinking. I bet the Germans have something to do with this. In Germany, I knew it. I knew the Germans would come up somehow when I mentioned beer. Anyways, in Germany, the people honored the pagan god Odin during the midwinter holiday by drinking beer in his honor. Germans were terrified of Odin. They believed he made nighttime flights through the sky to observe his people, and then decided who would prosper and who would perish. Because of his presence in the sky, many people chose to stay inside and, you guessed it, drink beer. In Rome, where winters were not as harsh as those in the far north, Saturnalia, a holiday honoring Saturn, not that Saturn, yes, that Saturn, beginning in the week leading up to the winter solstice and continuing for a full month, Saturnalia was a hedonistic time when everyone got drunk and ate to excess, and the normal Roman social order was turned upside down, much like a college tailgate party. For a month, slaves were given temporary freedom and treated as equals. But just for a month. They didn't want the slaves to get all feeling like they were normal people. Businesses and schools were closed so that everyone could participate in the holiday's festivities. Come to think of it, it sounds more like what Christmas is today. Also around the time of the winter solstice, Romans observed Juvenalia. That's a real word. A feast honoring the children of Rome. In addition, members of the upper class often celebrated the birth of Mithra, the god of the unconquering sun, on December 25th. The Romans believed that Mithra, an infant god, was born from a rock. Mithra's birthday was one of the most sacred days of the year. Now, in the early years of Christianity, Easter was the main holiday. The birth of Jesus was not celebrated. After all, the Bible never mentions when he was born. Now, it gives us clues like shepherds herding their flocks of sheep, which they don't do during the winter, but rather they do during spring. Now, in the 4th century, church officials decided to institute the birth of Jesus as a holiday. Pope Julius I chose January 25th. It's commonly believed that the church chose this day as a way of hijacking and absorbing the traditions of the pagan Saturnalia festival in the name of Jesus. At first, they called it the Feast of the Nativity. It quickly spread to Egypt by 432 AD and to England by the end of the 6th century. By holding Christmas at the same time as the traditional winter solstice festivals, church leaders increased the chances that Christians would be popularly embraced and the gospel message of Jesus would be spread, but they gave up the ability to dictate how it was celebrated. By the Middle Ages, Christianity had for the most part replaced pagan holidays. On Christmas, believers attended church. They celebrated in a drunken carnival-like atmosphere similar to today's Mardi Gras. Each year, a beggar or student would be crowned the Lord of Misrule, and eager celebrants played the part of the subjects. Poor would go to the houses of the rich and demand their best food and drink. If owners failed to comply, their visitors would most likely terrorize them with mischief. Hold on, is this my Halloween script? Nope, it's my Christmas script. Christmas became the time of year when the upper classes could repay their real or imagined debt to society by entertaining less fortunate citizens. In the early 17th century, that's the 1600s to you mathematically challenged, a wave of religious reform changed the way Christmas was celebrated in Europe. When Oliver Cromwell and his Puritan forces took over England in 1645, they vowed to rid England of decadence, and as a part of their effort, canceled Christmas. By popular demand, Charles II was restored to the throne, and with him came the return of the popular holiday. The Pilgrims that came to America in 1620 were even more orthodox in their Puritan beliefs than Cromwell. As a result, Christmas was not a holiday in the early Americas. From 1659 to 1681, the celebration of Christmas was actually outlawed in Boston. Anyone exhibiting the Christmas spirit was fined 5 shillings. By contrast, the Jamestown settlement, which is a different story altogether, Captain John Smith reported that Christmas was enjoyed by all and passed without incident. After the American Revolution, English customs fell out of favor, including Christmas. In fact, Christmas wasn't declared a federal holiday in the United States until June 26, 1870. It wasn't until the 19th century, again the 1800s, that Americans began to embrace Christmas. Americans reinvented Christmas and changed it from a carnival holiday into a family-centered day of peace and nostalgia. So what changed in the 1800s to pique America's interest in the holidays? Well, the early 1800s was a period of class conflict and turmoil. During this time, unemployment was high and gang rioting by the poor and lower middle class often occurred during the Christmas season. In 1828, the New York City Council instituted the city's first police force in response to a Christmas riot. This forced certain members of the upper class to begin to change the way Christmas was celebrated in America. Since only the rich could afford Christmas, this meant that many wealthy Americans were being robbed and murdered on Christmas for their Christmas loot. In 1819, best-selling author Washington Irving wrote The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, a series of stories about the celebration of Christmas in an English manor house. The sketches featured a squire who invited the peasants into the home for the holiday. In contrast to the problems faced in American society, the two groups mingled effortlessly. In Irving's mind, Christmas should be peaceful, warm-hearted holiday, bringing groups together across lines of wealth or social status. Irving's fictitious celebrants enjoyed ancient customs, including the crowning of the Lord of Misrule. Irving's book, however, was not based on any holiday celebrations that he had ever attended. In fact, many historians say that Irving's account actually invented tradition by implying that it described the true customs of the season. Also around this time, English author Charles Dickens created a classic holiday tale, A Christmas Carol. The story's message was the importance of charity and goodwill towards all humankind, struck a powerful chord in the United States and England, and showed members of Victorian society the benefits of celebrating the holiday with the poor, like not being robbed and murdered. The Americans and British family were also becoming less disciplined and more sensitive to the emotional needs of children during the early 1800s. Christmas provided families with a day when they could lavish attention and gifts on their children without appearing to spoil them. As Americans began to embrace Christmas as a perfect holiday, old customs were unearthed. People looked toward recent immigrants, mainly the Germans and Irish, Catholics, and Episcopalian churches, to see how the day should be celebrated. In the next 100 years, Americans built a Christmas tradition all their own that included pieces of many other customs, including decorating trees, which came from Germany, gift giving, which came from Egypt, and sending holiday greeting cards, which came from Hallmark. Although many families quickly bought into the idea that they were celebrating Christmas how it had been celebrated for centuries, Americans had really reinvented a holiday to fill the cultural need of a growing nation. Now, let's get to Santa Claus. The legend of Santa Claus can be traced back to a monk named St. Nicholas, who was born in Turkey around 280 AD. St. Nicholas gave away all his inherited wealth and traveled the countryside helping the poor and sick, becoming known as the protector of children and sailors. Nicholas was also present at the Council of Nicaea, which codified that Jesus was God and that the Trinity comprised of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In fact, Nicholas slapped or punched, depending on which manuscript you read, a presbyter named Arius for demanding that Jesus not be placed on equal footing with God the Father. St. Nicholas first entered American pop culture in the late 1800s in New York, when Dutch families gathered to honor the anniversary of the death of Sint Nicholas, Dutch for Saint Nicholas, or Sinterklaas for short. Santa Claus drew his name from this abbreviation. In 1822, Episcopal minister Clement Clark Moore wrote a Christmas poem called An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas, more popularly known today by its first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." The poem depicted Santa Claus as a jolly man who flies from home to home on a sled driven by reindeer to deliver toys. The iconic version of Santa Claus as a jolly man in red with a white beard and a sack full of toys was immortalized in 1881 when political cartoonist Thomas Nast drew on Moore's poem to create the image of old Saint Nick we know today.
So, that's the 10-minute history version of how Christmas came to be. If you like short history videos with sarcasm and humor on a wide variety of subjects, please consider subscribing to 10-Minute History. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. I would like to know what other historical facts you know about Christmas. Please leave your comments in the comments section below. If you want to help support 10-Minute History, please consider purchasing some of our merchandise. It's not the standard t-shirts and hats that most YouTubers offer, but rather inexpensive journals and notebooks that our creative marketing team has created. You can find the links to our merchandise selection down below. Thank you for watching. And until next time.